Welcome back to Illinois in Focus on this Tuesday morning, 1 week before Election Day, and we've got several things to tackle for you. One, if President Donald Trump gets into office, what's going to happen with Illinois when it comes to the president's plan to deport violent non-citizen migrants? Also, we got to talk about Election Day turnout. What's it going to look like? Pretty popular election, no question. But how many people have really voted thus far? We'll get the latest from the Illinois State Board of Elections, Matt Dietrich, spokesman there, and share that with you as well. Also, still some opportunities to early vote and even register to vote. So we'll get that out for you as well. It is Illinois in Focus Daily. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell with America's Talking Network, and join us each and every weekday morning at about 8 o'clock. Get the headlines at thecentersquare.com and find us anywhere you get podcasts. Just search Illinois in Focus.
The United States is now an occupied country, but it will soon be an occupied country no longer. Not going to be happening. Not going to be happening. November 5th, 2024, 9 days from now, will be Liberation Day in America. It's going to be Liberation Day.
That's former President Donald Trump at a rally Sunday, Madison Square Garden in New York, highly criticized by a lot in the corporate media as misogynist, sexist, racist, and so on. But he laid out again some of his plans to do mass deportations of violent non-citizens. Welcome back to Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. How does Illinois play in that operation of what Trump's promising to do if he's elected, which could be in a week from now, today? So we're looking at Election Day, November 5th. Obviously, top of the ticket is President of the United States. A little bit more of what Trump had to say, but we also got reaction yesterday from Governor J.B. Pritzker. He was in Springfield, and I asked him how Illinois is going to play a role in that mass deportation plan. So here's more from Trump on Sunday in New York.
On day one, I will launch the largest deportation program in American history. I'm going to get the criminals out. I will rescue every city and town that has been invaded and conquered. And we will put these vicious and bloodthirsty criminals in jail. We're going to kick them the hell out of our country as fast as possible.
So the former president's talked about how he wants to help get non-citizens who have violent criminal histories out of the country by working with local police and sheriffs. They know who they are. But obviously, Illinois has a sanctuary state law that prohibits local law enforcement from working with federal immigration officials if the only thing they have against somebody is a detainer. So a detainer order, an order to go out and detain them and then, take the next steps thereafter, possibly to deportation. So Governor J.B. Pritzker was in Springfield yesterday, got to ask him a question about this specifically, but somebody did ask about, his thoughts on the rally, Madison Square Garden, the racist things that were said that the questioner posed to the governor, and he responded saying, yes, it was vitriolic. There was a lot of misogyny. There was a lot of racism that Pritzker characterized coming from Trump's rally on Sunday. Here's just some of what he had to say there.
And I think Americans will show up as a result of that Madison Square Garden event many people will show up to vote against the Republican Party.
Governor, President Trump has promised to do mass deportations of violent criminals. He said that he wants to get rid of sanctuary cities. How would Illinois play into that if Trump does get into office and starts moving forward with mass deportations?
Well, yeah, you said two things there, and I think, all of us stand against violent criminals and think that they should, be imprisoned, or if they're illegal, undocumented in this country and they're committing violent crimes, they should be deported and turned over to authorities in their countries. Yeah, I think what Donald Trump represents is something that is a throwback to days when there was mass discrimination, racism across the country, and, by the way, forgets that this is a nation mostly of immigrants, and that we should honor that fact. Indeed, one of the people that he invited to stand on that stage and speak is an immigrant. Many of the best things that have happened to our economy over the last 50 years have been as a result of immigrants coming to this country and creating businesses, becoming Americans, and employing so many people. I mean, there are a lot of reasons why we should invite immigration to this country and have comprehensive immigration reform. It's what I stand for. I think it's what a majority of Americans believe in.
But would Illinois' law prevent, or how would that play into if the federal government's wanting to come in and get some local police assistance? Because he specifically said local police and sheriffs know who these bad actors are, and we'll use them to help round them up.
We saw already the beginnings of what Donald Trump would want to do back when he was president. You saw raids in Geneva, Illinois, into restaurants just to see if anybody in the back rooms of these restaurants happened to be undocumented immigrants. And I think it'll be that times 10. So are there things that we can do to prevent it? Sure, we've already passed some laws that will help prevent that. But the truth is that we should be protecting residents of the state of Illinois. Even if they're undocumented residents of the state, we should be protecting them. And, by the way, providing a path for people to seek citizenship. That's not something that the state of Illinois can do, of course. So we need federal government leadership to get that done.
The governor talking about giving a path to citizenship, trying to prohibit federal law enforcement from coming in to enforce immigration law, but also saying that, yes, if individuals are here with a violent criminal history as illegal aliens, they should be deported. He didn't use those terms exactly, but essentially reiterated that by saying, yes, violent people should be arrested and possibly deported. So an interesting kind of dynamic there with the governor's reaction to former President Trump. More detail from Trump on Sunday.
And to expedite removals of Tren de Aragua and other savage gangs like MS-13, which is equally vicious, I will invoke the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. Think of that. That's how far back. That's when they had law and order. They had some tough ones. Think of it, the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. You hear that, Mr. Speaker? Get ready. To target and dismantle every migrant criminal network operating on American soil. And there are lots of them. We don't have the same country anymore, you know that. And when you look at the polls and they say about the economy and they have all these different things, the worst nightmare that we're facing is what they've done to us on our borders. We had the safest border in the world. In fact, there's a chart, which I hope they have, because I didn't tell them I wanted it, but there's a chart that I love very much because I wouldn't be here.
And then he brings up the chart, and the crowd goes wild. Of course, the history of that chart, it's the chart that he pulled up in Butler, Pennsylvania, when he turned his head and avoided getting struck in the head by a bullet, which ultimately grazed his ear. But that was Trump. Of course, a much longer speech. He focused on a whole bunch of stuff, but the immigration issue and his plan to do mass deportations, interesting how it interacts with Illinois. But you also heard Trump talk about some of the polls. The governor yesterday was also asked about some of the polling data and who's ahead in this race.
I have to say, all the polls would indicate that this is a race that's neck and neck in almost every battleground state. Look at the polls, and it's 1 or 2 points either way for these candidates. And I think in that case, Democrats are most likely to win because, frankly, we're the ones knocking on doors. We're the ones making phone calls. Typically, and this is true across the battleground states, we have a better organization than the Republicans do.
Polls are so accurate. Witness President Hillary.
Oh, no, I don't think the polls are accurate. I'm just telling you what the polls say. Who knows? Read the tea leaves. We don't know exactly what the outcome is, which is why everybody's working so hard on the Democratic side to make sure that every last voter gets out to vote.
So again, interesting to kind of see where we're at a week out of the election. Of course, top of the ticket is President of the United States with former President Donald Trump, the Republican, and current Vice President Kamala Harris, the Democrat, who's actually only been running for president for, like 3 months? All right, so we got a week left. It is Illinois in Focus Daily with you each and every weekday morning. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, get the headlines at thecentersquare.com, and get this podcast anywhere you get podcasts. There are 8 million registered voters in Illinois, a little bit more than that. And more than 1.4 million of those have actually already voted, either through mail-in ballots that have been returned, filled out, or early voting by going to your polling place, or even some grace period voting that can take place as well. So a lot of people are out and voting, and it's not even election day. We got a week from today when the polls are going to open. But where are we at in the grand scheme of things in Illinois when it comes to voter turnout and the options still available for voters even before Election Day? I chatted with Matt Dietrich. He's the spokesman for the Illinois State Board of Elections yesterday, and he talked about where we're at and some things that are still available for voters. It's Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Get the podcast anywhere you get podcasts. Just search Illinois in Focus. All right, so where are we at in the giant picture of 8 million voters in Illinois?
Total early votes so far, we've got about a little over 1.4 million votes have been cast in a combination of voting by mail and early voting in person. The early voting in person is exceeding vote by mail as it normally does. We've got about 810,000 early votes that have been cast so far statewide compared to 625,000 mail ballots that have already been marked and returned by voters and received. Now, we still have about that many ballots that are still out there with voters because there's over 1.2 million vote by mail ballots were requested. So, and that number could grow a little bit because voters still have until Thursday. They have until the close of business on Thursday to request a vote by mail ballot from their election authority. So that number could grow, but that's a pretty big number for the number of votes cast before Election Day in Illinois.
Yeah, again, 8 million voters plus, and there still could be some more voters that are registering because you can register up to Election Day. But what does this mean for turnout? If we've got 1.4 million Illinois voters already voting of the 8 million that have registered, what does that mean for what the ultimate turnout's going to be for this year's presidential election?
If you an educated guess at turnout would say that we're going to have somewhere along the lines of 6 million ballots will be cast in this election if we're looking at what we saw in 2016 and 2020 in those presidential elections. So, we've already got 1.4 out of 6 million. So, getting close to 25% of the vote already being cast with still another week of early voting to go. And a whole lot of vote by mail ballots will continue to come in.
And it's something to consider in Illinois, and there's even been federal litigation about this, is Illinois takes up to 2 weeks to count mail-in ballots that are postmarked on Election Day. and that's to give the mail plenty of time to get those ballots in. He says typically, though, it's 3 or 4 days, and then the numbers coming into the local elections office drop significantly. But regardless, 2 weeks. And the federal litigation has been about, election day for federal offices is the first Tuesday of November. It's not up to 2 weeks after the fact. I don't know if the litigation's advanced anymore, but still, that's the law of the land in the state of Illinois. So again, turnout expected to be pretty large. 1992, there was a 73% voter turnout, and we didn't have that high of a voter turnout in Illinois until 2020, when it was 73%. Could we exceed that?
Yeah, I think we should hit or surpass that 73% based on what we're seeing, unless you see lots and lots more people voting outside of election day, and then it doesn't make up for the election day crowd that still goes out. I mean, historically, it had always been 2/3 and then 1/3. Ever since we started early voting, you had about 70% of the vote was cast on election day, and then gradually it went from being 25% early voting and 5% mail, and now it's gone up a little bit. But now we're probably going to see, I would guess we'll see at least 35 to 40% cast other than on election day. The question is, will those other 60% who like to go on election day, will they show up then? Or are we just eating into that crowd? That remains to be seen. So, huge amount of interest, obviously, in this election, as there was in 2020, possibly more so this time around, based on, anecdotally, we've been just absolutely flooded with voter calls for the last, I would say, 2 weeks, asking about, well, how do I register? I want to make sure, I moved. Where am I supposed to go? How do I do this? How do I get my mail? And normally we don't get a whole lot of those. We get some, but we don't get, it's not like we are having people all day long, one call after another. And that's what it's been like. So that sort of tells me that people who maybe they are on hold too long if they call their clerk's office, or we're getting a lot of calls from Chicago and Cook County, where, highly populated areas, and we think it might be overflowing where they give up. And so they look us up and call, and we can give the same information. But, it does seem like there's even more interest this time than there was 4 years ago.
So again, that's Matt Dietrich, spokesman for the Illinois State Board of Elections, talking about how voter turnout thus far, about 25% of voters already turning out in early voting. But then you get to what it's going to be like on election day. Are those people who already early voted going to eat into the people who traditionally vote on election day? Has yet to be seen. But with the inundation of calls of people asking, how do I register to vote? Dietrich says, that's signaling there's a lot more interest here. So you can still register to vote. He lays out a variety of things that voters still need to know about if you haven't cast a ballot yet.
Sure, there's several things to keep in mind. And number one, the most basic, is if you still need to register to vote, you can still do that. You can go to any early voting location in your county or in your jurisdiction and take your 2 pieces of ID, and you can register. You'll have to vote at the same time that you register. So just be prepared to do that. Also, on election day, you can register at your polling place or at the office of your election authority, county clerk. So again, if you need to register, just be sure to take your 2 pieces of ID. They have to prove both your identity and your residence. So even if if you've moved and you haven't updated your driver's license, you can still use that to verify your identity. But you're going to have to bring something that proves that you live at the address you say you live at. And generally, for that, people will use a piece of government issued mail, for example, or a bank statement that's mailed to your house. Your pay stub generally has your home address on it, a lease, a car registration. any type of official document that shows where you live. Take those with you. Now, if you get there and you, let's say on election day, you get to the polling place, but you can't find that second piece of ID, or you don't have all your ID together, you can still cast a provisional ballot, and then you'll have a week to complete your registration. So you're going to have to get into your county clerk's office and take the required ID so they can complete your registration. Then your ballot can be taken from the provisionals and voted as a regular ballot.
So again, many options still available. And even, it's not just the option of registering to vote on election day with proper identification. And early voting, expanded hours expected across the state in various jurisdictions, even into this weekend and on Sunday. But also, people can still request a mail-in ballot by Thursday. Tuesday's the election.
It's only 5 days before the election. There is a chance, depending on how your mail service works in your area, that it might be Monday, it might be election day, and you still haven't received your vote by mail ballot, and you're getting panicky about it. So if that happens to you, don't panic. If you have applied for a vote by mail ballot, but you haven't received it yet, you can go on that Monday or Sunday, if you have it, to an early voting site, or on election day, you can go to your polling place, and you simply, the election judge, when you give them your name and address, they'll see that you have requested and been mailed a vote by mail ballot. Then you'll tell them, I didn't get it. And so you'll sign an attestation that says, I applied for but did not receive my vote by mail ballot. I'm hereby forfeiting my vote by mail ballot, and I'm choosing to vote in person instead. At that point, your mail ballot's canceled. You'll be instructed that if it does arrive, you should destroy it, and whatever you do, don't try to vote it again. That could get you in some trouble. The vote by mail ballot won't be counted because your in-person vote will count. But technically, if you do that, you're trying to vote twice, and you're automatically caught if that happens. So don't do that. But if you have applied for it, you haven't received it yet, go in and tell the election judge, you'll sign it. It'll void your mail ballot. You vote in person. That's what all people need to remember, I think, now.
And Illinois State Board of Elections spokesman Matt Dietrich sharing some things voters need to know about heading into the final week of election day, Tuesday, November 5th. I believe polls open, 7 o'clock in the morning, or is it 6 o'clock? All right, are you ready? Illinois in Focus Daily. We'll be covering all that and more. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and get the podcast where you get podcasts. Get the headlines at thecentersquare.com. All right, that's all I got for you guys today. Tomorrow, I'll share a conversation I had with a individual heading up the New Illinois movement, a movement to split the state in two. Of course, there are several resolutions on county ballots across the state, but what's the ultimate trajectory of all of this? So be with us tomorrow as we review that conversation and any other news that's expected to pop out today. There's plenty of it, so we'll have at it. It's Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Follow along anywhere you get podcasts, Illinois in Focus. Also, America's Talking Network, news clips, segments, live show, all of that. All right, make it happen. We'll see you soon.